Hi, my name is Louise Schoen-Stark and I look after books for Google Play, and I'm really excited to be working with the Brisbane Writers Festival this weekend to bring you a series of fantastic hangouts on air with attending authors. Our first author is the wonderful Claire Bidwell Smith, and she's a therapist specialising in grief, and she's worked with the Dave Eggers Literary Centre called 826LA. She's also written for Time Out New York, BlackBook, the Huffington Post, and Chicago Public Radio. So she's been writing and reading and blogging for many, many years. Her first book, The Rules of Inheritance, is a powerful memoir about the struggle to cope with the loss of her parents, using the 5 stages of grief as a window into her personal experience. It's an incredibly powerful memoir, which I couldn't put down. Absolutely loved it, and I'm very excited that she's joining us today. Welcome, Claire.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I did want to talk a little bit first about your book, The Rules of Inheritance. I've read quite a few memoirs on grief, and what I thought was quite different about yours is that it's very, very raw, and grief was very messy. It wasn't clean, and I thought that that was incredibly powerful. Talk a little bit about how it felt to write such a raw book.
Yeah, you know, after my mother died when I was 18, I read a lot of other memoirs, and I was kind of searching for something to not feel so alone. I didn't know anybody my age who had been through something like that, and when I set out to write my own book, I wanted to create something that would be equally helpful to people when they were going through their own loss and grief. And so I also felt like if I was going to write this book and really do it, I had to be as honest as possible, and that would be the thing that would be most helpful. As a grief counselor now, I've found that people feel really lonely when they're grieving, and they feel like they're doing it wrong, and they often feel pretty confused about the process, and meeting other people who are going through something similar is helpful. So that's what I wanted to create with this book, was just something that would be helpful to others who are grieving.
And did you write this book before or after you became a grief counsellor?
I wrote it after. I was writing kind of versions of it for a while, but I didn't quite find the book itself until I became a grief counselor. And when I decided to use Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages, it kind of all came together. Initially, I was going to write a book more about grief, just kind of technically about grief from a psychological standpoint. But then I realized that the best way for me to really write about grief was to share my own experience.
And what are those 5 stages? Talk a little bit through what people go through when they're grieving.
Sure. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance are the 5 stages. And I guess the thing that's interesting to me is that everybody kind of knows what they are. They're applied to all sorts of things, leaving a relationship or quitting smoking or going on a diet. Everyone's always talking about these 5 stages in lots of ways, but there's still a lot of confusion over them. Often people that I counsel come to me and they're not sure if they're doing it right. They're confused about the bargaining stage, or they only felt angry and didn't feel sad, or vice versa. And so I think what I wanted to create with my book was something that showed how fluid the stages really are, that there's not this perfect formula, that you don't go A, B, C, through them. And so my book is told non-linearly. So you see me in the first section in denial at age 18, and then again, at age 18 when my mother died, and then again at 14 when my parents both got sick, and then at 25 when my father got sick again. Because I just wanted to show how the stages kind of come and go, and you may use bits of them here or there, and just how they're quite malleable.
And when you were going through the grieving process yourself, were you aware of these stages, and were you talking to yourself about this is normal, or were you just beating yourself up?
I was just beating myself up. I was not aware really of them. I like I said, I didn't know anyone who'd been through anything like I had been through, and I didn't have a lot of encouragement or support to seek out therapy. And so I wasn't really aware that I was grieving for as long as I was. I think our society tells us a lot about how long we should grieve, and usually it's not very long. Usually people expect you to come out of it at 6 months or a year. And so when I was 1 year, 2 years, 3 years past my mother's death, and I was still really sad and really depressed, I just thought there was something wrong with me. I thought that I had anxiety problems or just depression or whatever. I didn't attribute it still to grieving. It was only later when I began to read about it more and really realized, yes, of course, that was still grief, and I was just quite immersed in it.
Wow. I hope that your book helps other people. I'm lucky enough to not have experienced grief, but reading your book feels like you're allowed to behave in any way that is right, and actually not beating yourself up is probably one of the most important things.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that there's a funny thing about grief where people really feel like they're doing it wrong. People get caught up in how to grieve, and I think that that's maybe just something that our society pushes on us. That there's a certain way that we need to grieve, and we need to do it this way, and we need to be done with it here, and we need to do these certain stages. But the thing about grief is that it's so individual and it's so particular to who you are. There are universal traits of grief, universal aspects, but how you move through the grief process is entirely up to you and about you and about the person you lost too. It's different for everyone. You could lose a friend and you would have a very different grief process there than you would when you lose a parent or a child. And you could have all three experiences in one lifetime, and they're all going to be different. So I think the thing that's really important in grief is just to be accepting of what you're feeling and going through. And the way to do that is to reach out and to connect to other people who understand.
Thank you very much. I know that people watching will find that really inspiring and helpful, and I do urge them to go out and read the book. You've been writing for many years. You've been blogging since 2003, which makes you a blogging pioneer, I think. You blogged about all sorts of things, grief, parenthood, food. How's the blogging world changed since you first started in 2003?
Oh, well, it's really blown up. When I first started, it was just like I had this weird online diary, and people didn't know what a blog was, and I didn't even know what I was doing. I was like a year out of college, and I missed having writing assignments regularly, so I started the blog as a way to just keep myself writing all the time, and it's been great for that. It's, once I had all of a sudden people reading it, I put more effort into my writing and to actually working on this kind of ongoing series of essays and daily posts. And I mean, the blogosphere now is incredible. The amount of people that are blogging, the kind of personal lives you can go into, the news and sports, entertainment, everything you can learn about, photography. And I think it's quite fascinating. And just the way it's connected the world, I have met so many people through blogging. It's not just like overseas, but even in the States, I just meet people constantly who are blog readers of mine, and they've become friends. And I don't know, it's been a really cool experience. I love it.
And it's connected you with Australian readers, strangely, from very far away. You've found Australian followers and met them while you've been here in Australia this time, haven't you?
Yeah, I was written about in the Sydney Morning Herald back in 2003, and ever since then I've had so many Australian readers. And so I've been meeting them in each city I've been to. In Melbourne, some of them came out to one of my panels, and I signed their books and got to chat for a while. And then in Sydney, I did like a meetup at the Botanic Gardens, and I know I've got some readers coming today and tomorrow here in Brisbane. So it's been really fantastic. It's been really cool to meet people in person. And then, of course, it was great because before I came, they were all emailing me and telling me where to go, what to do, and what to eat, and that was cool.
So you've been writing for years. You're obviously passionate about reading and writing and literacy. Tell us how you got involved with Dave Eggers.
Well, I thought I was going to marry Dave Eggers. That was the plan. I read his book when it first came out, and he was the only person I knew my age who kind of been through that. He lost both of his parents, and he wrote a memoir about it, for anyone who doesn't know, called A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. And I read it, and I thought, oh my gosh, here's somebody who really understands my experience. And he's my age, and he's kind of cute, and he's a writer. So, well, we'll just get married, and then life will be grand. And that didn't quite work out, because when I met him, he had a wife. So I decided I would work for him. He runs a series of nonprofits in the States called A26. And they're based out of San Francisco, and they're Los Angeles, and New York, and Chicago, and Michigan, and DC. And they work with kids, underserved students, and kind of building literacy programs and just promoting a lot of writing. So I helped open the LA branch. And, I kind of looked to Dave to give me the answers on how to get through the loss of my parents at a young age. And I thought that if I met him and we were able to become friends, he would be able to kind of impart some wisdom to me. And we didn't exactly become friends. I mean, I knew him, worked for him. And the thing that was funny was that I did learn a lot from him, and not necessarily him sitting me down and telling me how to get over the loss of my parents, but just by working at this amazing thing he created. I came out of a year after my father's death feeling really depressed. And then when I started working at 826, and
Oh, we've lost the sound a little bit there. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Oh, you're back. Great.
Yeah. Am I back?
Yes. So you just started, and you found working there really helped you.
Yeah, it was. I came out of this year of depression, and I had been thinking so much about myself and what I didn't have, and really focused on kind of feeling sorry for myself. And it all changed when I started working with these kids and giving something of myself, and going in every day and just spending my day doing something that was so much bigger than me. And I would go home every day feeling completely different and starting to come back into the world. And I realized that that was such a big part of moving forward, was kind of learning how to give of myself. And so
and you're still working with them now?
I'm not anymore. But it kind of propelled me into a whole different field. I ended up going back and getting my master's after working for him, and now I'm a therapist and I have a private practice. I do work with 826 LA a little bit now and then. I just taught a workshop there a couple months ago. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And you're also a bit of a foodie. You've spent time as a food writer reviewing restaurants for BlackBook. Tell us a little bit about that. You do that with your husband?
I do. My mother was a cook and she owned a restaurant, so I've kind of always been immersed in the food world, and I worked in restaurants for years, bartending and waitressing. And in New York, I started writing for Time Out New York. That was where I did my first food review. And then in Los Angeles and Chicago, and I've just always been writing about food. It's fun to write about. It's fun to eat. I currently write for BlackBook magazine. I do all the Los Angeles restaurant openings. My husband, too. We co-write it. It's really
that sounds like a really good excuse to go out to restaurants.
It is. It's a great way to try all kinds of food, but it's really hard to stay slim because you just end up eating everything.
And how have you found Australian food?
It's great. I can't get enough sausage rolls and pastries and croissants and coffee. I just can't stop. It's really good.
I think coffee, Australians are obsessed by coffee, particularly people in Melbourne. If you ask someone in the street where to get a good coffee, they will spend 10 minutes telling you the 3 or 4 options you should consider before making your final choice.
Yeah, no, I've been drinking like 5 lattes a day.
Well, you should go and have a little look at the Three Monkeys Cafe where I worked as a teenager. It's just down the road from the South Bank.
Okay.
I've got coffee down there. You also spent some time as a travel writer.
Mm-hmm.
Have you travelled the world extensively as well, and how did you get into that?
Yeah, I've traveled quite a bit. The last few years I've been busy having children, so I haven't been traveling as much as I'd like. But I'm here now, so that's nice. Yeah, for many years I was doing a lot of travel writing. I started working for a magazine in the States called Student Traveler, and it was just geared towards college kids. And I took my first big travel trip through them, which was to the Philippines. And I write about that in my book. And that was quite an adventure. I've been to Asia 4 times now. I've been to Mexico and Europe a lot, the Caribbean. I really want to go to India next, and I would like to get on to South America. Been to Costa Rica travel writing. And yeah, and now I'm trying to make my kids into travelers. I brought my 2 little girls with me on this trip to Australia, my 10-week-old baby and my 3-year-old daughter. So I'm going to make them into little adventurers as well.
Make sure they're eating sausage rolls from a very early age.
Oh, my daughter Veronica is obsessed with sausage rolls, even more than me. They're like her new corn dog.
So parenthood is something else that you blog about quite regularly as well. And I know I'm a mother as well. I became a mother 3 years ago. I have a 3-year-old girl, and I know that my relationship with my mother changed when that happened. And of course, you lost your mother. Do you still hear her? And is she still with you when you're parenting?
Yeah, I feel more than ever that I've gotten my mother back in becoming a parent. I feel closer to her than ever, and I hear her all the time. It's kind of disturbing, just in the way I hear my own voice talking to my girls, and it just reminds me so much of my mom. I feel like she's back in the room, and I hear all these phrases I say and things I do, and it's been quite a gift. I feel like I've gotten her back in so many ways. It's a little bittersweet now and then to think about what it would be like if she were actually here and could meet my daughters. But for the most part, it's been more of a gift than anything. Yeah, I'm really.
That's amazing. That's really lovely to hear. Because I'm exactly the same. I hear things coming out of my mouth that I heard 35 years ago, and
Right?
I'm quite surprised that they were buried there, and I'd forgotten about them. But I'm still saying them.
So funny. It's uncanny, the things that I'm just like, wow, that was my mother. Yeah.
Getting back to books, are there any books that you would recommend to your readers to read, firstly about grief, or just books that you've read in general recently that you've absolutely loved and pressed into other people's hands?
Yeah, you know, Cheryl Strayed is really big in the States right now. She has the memoir out called Wild, Wild is really good. But what I really love is her book called Tiny Beautiful Things, and it's her series of Q&As from the Rumpus about just life people wrote in, like Dear Sugar column, and they wrote in about their problems, and she wrote the most incredible responses. And the book is so heartwarming, and it just makes you feel, I don't know, human, like we're all just human and connected, and we all have our faults, but we're all trying to kind of get through this life, and it's an incredible book. It's called Tiny Beautiful Things. I love memoirs. I'm always reading tons of memoirs. I love The Glass Castle. I love Stephen Elliott's memoir. Bill Clegg had a really interesting memoir come out in the States recently called Portrait of an Artist as an Addict, Portrait of a Young Man as an Addict, which I thought was kind of interestingly written. One of the books that I credit for helping me figure out my memoir, this is surprising, a weird fact. My husband was reading Andre Agassi's memoir, Open, and he was in bed, and he was just like, oh my God, this book is amazing. And he's like, you have to read this book. And I said, I don't want to read Andre Agassi's memoir. I don't care about Andre Agassi's memoir. And he forced it on me, and I read the first page and could not get enough of it. It's actually ghostwritten by an author, last name Moringer, and he has his own memoir called The Tender Bar. And he's a fantastic writer. And so I recommend those books.
Yes, I read The Tender Bar. That was quite extraordinary, beautifully written.
Wasn't it great? You should read Open, Andre Agassi's book. It's really good.
I'm a bit like you. I saw it and thought, I'm really not that interested in Andre Agassi, but I do know that it's one of those books that transcends its job as a memoir of a sports star.
Interested in Andre Agassi. It's a great book. It's so surprising. Yeah.
And are you working on something else now?
I am. I'm working on a book about the afterlife. It's kind of like a spiritual memoir. I'm trying to figure out what I believe happens next. So I'm going into all kinds of experiences like seeing psychic mediums and taking Kabbalah classes and doing past life therapy and trying to come out of the experience with a new understanding and a new belief about what happens next. Kind of going into it from not having any particular religious background or any particular belief system. But the one, I've really come through the grief and loss of my parents into a really peaceful place, but the one thing I still have that I have been unable to overcome is just kind of this anxiety about what will happen when I die, from my daughters, or what would happen if I lost someone else that I love. And so I'd really like to find some kind of peace with what I believe about death, and that's the goal of the book.
And I can imagine it's not going to be, given your writing style and the rawness, I'm imagining there'll be no hiding and no fluffiness in your journey.
No, I don't think so. But I think there will be some humorous moments because there's been some really funny stuff that I've done. I was out in Sedona last fall in the U.S., and it's like the New Age capital of the United States, and I did some really weird experiences. So I think there'll be some funny stuff in there, but for the most part, it will definitely be very raw and honest.
So some of it is feeling believable, and other bits are just feeling this is just a little bit ridiculous.
They've all been a little of both. Like I did this past life regression where this guy regressed me back to a past life, and it was both. Like part of it was so believable, and I kind of think maybe it's real, but also it was kind of ridiculous and hilarious. And the psychic mediums have been similar. Like they've been kind of.
Sorry. We've lost you a little bit there. Can you say that again? Can you repeat that last sentence? We just lost you a second. I think we may have lost you altogether. We're here at the moment with broadcasting from the Brisbane Writers Festival, talking to Claire Bidwell Smith. Here she's back, and we were just talking about past life regressions and what that was like. Right, I think we've lost the sound altogether. You can still hear me? I can't hear you at the moment. Perhaps Letitia can help out and just see if we can get that sound back on. Can you say something?
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, you're back. Fantastic. So let's just go back to those past life regressions. You said it was quite believable, but other parts of it were quite ridiculous. Yeah,
it's been, there have been things like really uncanny little moments with the psychic mediums and the past life therapists where I really believe it to a certain degree, and then it's also been quite ridiculous too, but in a fun way. So I'm really looking forward to getting this book out.
Fantastic. And finally, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your advice to writers I mean, you've been blogging for such a long time. Do you advise young writers to put pen to paper, or at least fingers to keypad? What should they do when they're getting started?
Oh, just write as much as you can, and try not to beat yourself up as you go. Try not to edit as you go. You know, I wrote 2 whole versions of my book before I wrote this 3rd version, and they were terrible, and I was so frustrated, but I now credit them for being, you know, the reason I was able to get to the 3rd draft. I couldn't have gotten to this 3rd version unless I'd written these 2 terrible versions. So you just have to keep writing all the time, even if it feels like you're getting nowhere. You really are. And read a lot too. Read everything you can. Read poetry, memoirs, fiction, you know, everything.
That's fantastic. I think it's such a difficult environment to get into now as a writer, because there are so many books and so many things to read, social media, and publishers. It's hard to get published, so it's quite a journey if you're quite serious about it. It has to be a passion, not just something you fancy, doesn't it?
It is. You really have to stick it out, and it's not for the faint of heart, because there's a lot of rejection along the way. I went through a lot of. I could not stop with this book. I was determined to write it and to get it out. Here I am.
The other thing that's, as an American visiting Australia at the moment, you're probably getting this all the time, but the political race for the White House has started again, and some of the images that we're seeing from the US are extraordinary at the moment. Is it an exciting time to be in the US when there's this kind of battle going on?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. I just think having Barack Obama in the White House has been really exciting and just changed a lot for just the kind of landscape of politics in the U.S. And it's been invigorating all over again. Obviously, I'm a Democrat and a fan of Obama, and I just think it's sparked a lot of great conversation, and he's been such a great figure to kind of get behind. So it's been fun.
Very exciting. Well, American politics, when it comes to presidential races, are just much more glamorous than ours, I have to say.
Well, they're so much more dramatic.
Much more dramatic.
A lot of weird surprises and all kinds of things. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think there was ever another fun moment from the 2008 election, and when they rolled out Sarah Palin. It was just so fantastic. You know, like I couldn't stand her, but it was so fun to hate her. So.
Yeah, I think that at the moment what seems to be the problem in Australian politics is it's just consumed by hate. There's so much nastiness in politics now, and it's a shame that it's sort of away from the big issues, but that seems to be a bit of a global thing. But it has been really, really lovely to have you with us today. It's been lovely to talk with you about your book and your writing in all sorts of different ways. It's amazing to meet such a fully rounded writer who has literally written about almost everything: food, travel, parenthood, grief. It's quite extraordinary, so thank you for your time. The Rules of Inheritance is out now. I've read it. I advise people to go out and get it. It's incredibly powerful, moving, and perfectly written. So it's available on the Google Play Store now and at all good bookstore shops. Thank you, Claire, and enjoy the rest of your time in Australia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.